there's a loss of the sense of urgency. There's a loss of the sense of emergency. And we are on a collision course with nature. But we now know that the enemy has many more heads, many more muscles, and many more arms, and many more tails. And that it is faster and more generally stronger than we thought. And that it is growing also at a speed which we probably underestimated. Are we better off in terms of our policy actions? Absolutely. The awareness, the policies, the commitments, etc. Yes, but the enemy is moving even faster. And therefore, we need to recalibrate the level of ambition. We need to embrace a much more transformative agenda to align finance and investment with the goals of the Paris Agreement. This means undertaking rapid and radical transformations in our energy, urban infrastructure, and industrial systems. These transformations are at the heart of our financing climate futures, rethinking infrastructure. This publication, which we just put out, together with the UN environment, with UNEP, and with the World Bank Group. Our joint report provides a roadmap for governments on how to move away from incremental, such gradual, slow progress on climate action. Of the hundreds of policy levers and actions that governments can take, the report identifies 6 priority areas for driving transformational change. Put our money where our mouth is. We need to invest in the climate action needed to safeguard the well-being of our planet, of our people, wildlife, societies, economies. We need to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees centigrade.
If we want to get to 2 degrees Celsius, which is what the Paris Agreement hopes we all will, we need to do 3 times more. And if we want to go to 1.5 degrees Celsius, as the IPCC report urges us to, we need to do 5 times more. And the scary thing is that if we started actually in 2003 doing things in the right earnest, we needed to reduce our mitigation pathway by 4% per annum. 15 years later, that number has quadrupled. And with every passing day, the urgency becomes worse and worse and worse. And we think only in incremental terms.
Equally important are stronger investments in sustainable technologies. And to achieve this, we need an enabling state that sets the right incentives. For such a radical transformation process, we need to avoid economic and social breaks as much as possible. To that end, we cannot have a phase-out without offering alternatives. And we decided to have the phase-out of coal, and so we need to offer these alternatives. What is still missing? We know that the energy transition in the electric sector alone is not enough. We have to do much more, especially in the area of transport, in agriculture and buildings. And our greatest concern in particular is the transport sector, where we are far too dependent on fossil fuels. It's really a problem in that.
There are some limitations. We can't just divest from a company and think that that solves the problem. We have to be invested. We have to realize that the large companies today is part of the solution.
You know, the very important breakthrough in Paris was that finally the countries realized that they need to commit themselves to stop polluting or generating carbon emissions to the atmosphere. Now the challenge is letting countries understand that it's in their own self-interest to mobilize domestic resources in order to fill the climate finance gap. You can double and triple international flows of resources from the north to the south, that is not going to fill that gap. So you need to mobilize domestic resources, and countries need to understand that it's in their own self-interest.
The report says we really need to step up in 3 different areas. So first is to deliver on what we've already committed and increase our ambition over time. The second is to work on with developing countries on integrating the climate agenda into all of their planning and budgeting and investment decisions. And the third is to use the limited concessional financing that is available only where it's going to have the biggest climate impact.
So what is the Paris Collaborative and Green Budget about? It's about adopting a system. It's not about spending. It's about making sure that every penny that is spent publicly is consistent with the objective of lowering emissions. Governments are spending 500 billion subsidizing fossil fuels, and they're only spending 50 billion promoting biodiversity. What kind of nonsense is that in terms of the priorities? We are undoing with one hand what we are doing very painfully and at great expense of time and talent and political capital with the other.